and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your weekly dose of the top pro-life news and issues, all from a Catholic perspective. I am your host, Catherine Hadro, in our Washington, D.C. studio. Thank you for joining us. In this week's show, we debunk the myth abortion lowers maternal mortality rates. Planned Parenthood's new acting president defends their abortion agenda. We speak out. And this.
In the beginning, most of the time, they're like, I didn't even know that was your mom, or I didn't even know that was your daughter. And they're just like intrigued and love that.
A mother-daughter duo work together to build up a culture of life. But first, our top story, pro-abortion groups Planned Parenthood and the American Civil Liberties Union are suing Missouri over an abortion ban. The pro-abortion groups filed a federal lawsuit last week to stop a Missouri law banning abortions beyond the 8th week of pregnancy from taking effect later this month. They argue it's unconstitutional. If the courts do not uphold the 8-week ban, the bill includes a series of other bans ranging from 14 to 20 weeks. It also bans abortions that discriminate based on race, sex, or a potential Down syndrome diagnosis. Missouri's Republican Governor Mike Parson signed the bill into law in May. This Missouri case is seen as a potential case that could make its way up to the Supreme Court as a challenge to Roe v. Wade, the 1973 Supreme Court decision legalizing abortion nationwide. It's one out of the recent flurry of other pro-life bills recently signed into law, ranging from Alabama to Arkansas. To discuss this pro-life momentum and whether or not we'll likely see Roe v. Wade overturned, we spoke with a top law expert who has had his own cases argued in Supreme Court, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. He recently joined us in studio. Here's our interview. Joining us now is Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
With a wave of recent pro-life laws, we've seen growing speculation that Roe v. Wade might be overturned. As your state's Attorney General, someone whose cases have been heard in the Supreme Court multiple times, do you foresee Roe v. Wade being overturned?
I have always believed that. The reason I've been in this fight for so long is I've always believed that we had the opportunity. I think it's clearly unconstitutional. I was in law school. The professors admitted that it was made up, that there was no precedent for it. There was no statutory authority. It's as unconstitutional of a law that we have. And so I've always been optimistic that if we get judges in these courts that respect the Constitution and what was actually meant by the Constitution, that we would overturn Roe v. Wade eventually.
Are there any particular state laws or policies that you see as the most likely case to challenge Roe?
You know, you never know. You never know like what the timing is going to be. You don't know exactly what one's going to make it up to the Supreme Court. You know, it could be something like the heartbeat bill, or you never know what they're going to decide when they're going to decide to take a certain type of case and invalidate the whole law.
And as a legal expert, can you clarify what would happen legally with abortion if Roe v. Wade is overturned?
So then it would go back to the states. I mean, before Roe v. Wade, Texas had laws that protected the unborn, and that was overturned. It was overturned in every state with a swoop of a pen by 7 Supreme Court justices. Our argument has always been it's a state's issue, and each state would have the opportunity to decide what they wanted the law to be. Clearly, in my state, I think we would be much more restrictive than the abortions law are now, and potentially, hopefully, ban it. But other states might not do the same thing, and people will have the opportunity, though, to at least have votes on it, elected representatives that can be unelected or elected based on their votes.
Speaking of your pro-life leadership, you recently asked the U.S. Supreme Court to block abortion clinics and abortion providers from challenging pro-life state laws on behalf of their patients. Why is this important?
Because they don't have standing, really. We don't believe they have standing to sue. There's no harm to them. The harm is supposedly to these patients that aren't able to get abortions, and so they shouldn't be able to step in the shoes. You normally have standing rules as to who can sue and who can't, and they shouldn't have the opportunity to basically violate standing rules and step into the shoes when they're not suffering harm.
I also want to get your take on a Texas congressional race. Wendy Davis is announcing a run for Congress. She rose to fame because of that 13-hour abortion bill filibuster. You were there. What should Texas voters know about Wendy Davis?
Well, I mean, I worked with her in her Senate. She's not the most conservative legislator I've ever seen. She's also not pro-life, clearly fought hard to restrict the ability of Texas to actually stop Texas from being able to restrict certain abortion providers from doing certain things, like really simple regulations like other surgical centers have. She fought to prevent us to be able to do it. So she has a pretty unreasonable view on the life issue, and I would argue she has unreasonable views on some other issues as well.
Do you think that's going to be a competitive race?
You know, it's really hard to know. It'll depend a lot on how the presidential race is going and who the Democrats put up and who the, you know, obviously we have Trump running as a Republican. So it'll depend on how competitive that is. But I mean, I think that she'll lose.
Finally, I know the pro-life issue is a personal one to your family. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So my wife was adopted, and it was prior to Roe v. Wade. And you know, we've always known that her mother decided to give her life. We have 4 children, and we've also had the opportunity to meet Angela's birth mother, who's a wonderful person. And you know, I think it's been really neat. As Angela's adopted mother has passed away, she has a relationship with her birth mother, and they have a very close relationship. She's met her sisters and brothers and aunts and uncles, and you know, obviously if Roe v. Wade had been in place, or you know, she'd made a different decision, we'd have a different result. My children obviously wouldn't be here, and obviously I wouldn't have had the time that I've had with her.
Well, I'm grateful to hear that story, and grateful that you're here with us. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, thank you.
Thank you.
Joining us now in studio to discuss the role of the courts in the pro-life movement is Prudence Robertson, a communications associate for the Susan B. Anthony List. Prudence, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
First off, can you speak to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's leadership in the pro-life movement? What do his legal actions mean in these wider efforts to overturn Roe v. Wade?
Absolutely. Ken Paxton is a longtime pro-life leader. Before he served as Attorney General, he served in the state legislature where he championed pro-life laws that included informed consent, health and safety regulations, as well as stopping late-term abortion. As Attorney General, he has led the charge in investigating Planned Parenthood and their role in harvesting and selling baby body parts. And he ultimately was a key figure in getting Planned Parenthood kicked out of Texas's Medicaid program altogether. So having strong pro-life leaders as Attorney General like Ken Paxton is really key in getting these laws pushed forward and advanced in the states.
That's really helpful insight. I want to hone in now on this specific Missouri case and the news surrounding it. Can you break down this Missouri pro-life law that's being legally challenged?
Absolutely, yes. So it's called the Missouri Stands for the Unborn Act, and it's really one of the most pro-life pieces of legislation that we've ever seen. Some viewers may remember Sue Liebel. She works for Susan B. Anthony List, and she's been working very hard with pro-life men and women in the Missouri legislature to pass this law. And it's really what we like to call a kitchen sink type of legislation because of all of the provisions that it includes. It has an 8-week limit on abortion as well as a limit after 5 months, which is when science proves that babies can feel intense pain while undergoing an abortion. It also includes a ban on discriminatory abortions that are performed because it is found that the baby is a certain gender or that it has a disability such as Down syndrome. And as you know, the ACLU recently filed a lawsuit against this legislation asking a federal judge in the Fifth Circuit to overturn the law. And the reason they're going after the entire law is because of how comprehensive it is. It truly is such a pro-life win. It's a great piece of legislation, and it's in a pro-life state. Missouri voters, 82% of them, believe that there should be a law that stops late-term abortion, and we believe that their will should be respected in this case.
That being said, what's the likelihood of this being the case to overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, it's very likely that a piece of legislation like this could challenge Roe. I mean, there are a lot of provisions in it, and the Supreme Court could choose to take up each one individually or none of them at all. It really depends on what happens right now in the lower courts. Susan B. Anthony List is monitoring 3 different types of cases. So we have pain-capable cases that stop late-term abortion. We have cases that include health and safety regulations to protect women. And we have cases that include discriminatory abortion bans, like this Missouri law does. And you know, ultimately the Supreme Court chooses which cases it will take up. But we believe at Susan B. Anthony List that these types of cases present the best challenge to Roe.
Prudence, there are over a dozen cases currently pending in federal circuit courts that could be appealed in the Supreme Court in the future. Why are we seeing such an uptick in abortion-related cases?
It's true. We're seeing a lot of pro-life legislation, bold legislation, being introduced in states all across the country, and that's because lawmakers are responding to the extreme abortion agenda that we've seen in New York and Virginia and other places. And they're also responding to President Trump and the way that he has transformed the courts by confirming a record number of pro-life judges. And the fact of the matter is that Roe v. Wade legalized abortion up until the minute of birth, and that truly is such a radical thing. And as more and more Americans realize that that is the national status quo today, they're calling for these pro-life laws.
Thank you for all of that helpful background and insight. Prudence Robertson with the Susan B. Anthony List. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
We have an important pro-life update we want you to hear about. Back in 2016, the Obama administration issued a regulation attempting to reinterpret a civil rights law in a way that could force doctors, nurses, and other healthcare providers to participate in abortion procedures against their will. It did this by allowing those healthcare workers to be accused of discrimination if they refuse to participate in an abortion. But recently, the Trump administration has proposed a new regulation correcting this language. And that brings us to this week's call to action. Go to ProLifeWeekly.com to tell President Trump and his administration to finalize the proposed regulation protecting the conscience rights of healthcare entities that do not want to commit abortions. When you get to our website, ProLifeWeekly.com, you will be able to fill out your information and deliver this message directly to President Trump and his administration. It is so important that healthcare professionals are not forced to participate in the brutal violence of abortion against their will. Let's make sure our voice is heard and the president acts to protect the conscience rights of healthcare workers. Send your message by going to ProLifeWeekly.com. Turning now to our next segment, we are going to debunk a talking point we hear time and time again from abortion advocates, that restricting abortion drives up maternal mortality rates. Here's one example. In 2016, former Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton spoke to Planned Parenthood supporters on the campaign trail, and in her speech said, "Roe v. Wade guaranteed the right to safe, legal abortion, and this is a fact that is not often heard, but I hope you will repeat it. America's maternal mortality rate dropped dramatically." And back in 2012, one study claimed to find women were about 14 times more likely to die during or after giving birth to a live baby compared to women who die from abortion complications. Joining us now is Dr. Ingrid Skop, an associate scholar at the Charlotte Lozier Institute and an expert on maternal mortality. She's also a board member of the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Dr. Skop, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
We often hear abortion advocates link maternal mortality with pro-life laws. First off, is there any connection there?
This is a disingenuous argument. Most of the laws, with the exception of the recent heartbeat bills, want to do two things. They want to protect a woman, they want to make the procedure safer for her, and they also want to give her an opportunity to know all of her options so that she makes an informed decision. I think that when they say that, they're referring to a study that said that abortion was 14 times safer than childbirth. So they feel that women should have abortions so that they don't have to take the risk of having a child. The study is flawed. It had two different denominators. One compared abortions to the number of 100,000 abortions. The other compared maternal mortality to the number of 100,000 live births, which are apples and oranges.
Right.
In addition, we don't really know how many deaths occur related to abortion. We don't have a good way of picking up that data.
Why then is there racial disparity with maternal mortality rates? Can you explain that?
Oh, this is such an... It's led to a lot of, I think, soul searching by so many people. Unfortunately, there have been simplistic accusations that physicians practice with implicit racism, that we don't take care of black women as well as we take care of white women or more affluent women. I've never seen that to be the case. I think there's three things we should be looking at. One is that the black population has a higher risk of some conditions that can make a more complicated pregnancy. The rate of obesity, the rate of hypertension, the rate of diabetes are higher in the black population, so we should be thinking about that. The black population, unfortunately, has a rate of abortion that's 3.7 times higher than the white population. There are some things about abortion that can put a woman at risk in a subsequent pregnancy. She is more likely to have a preterm delivery. Interventions that we do to try to stop a woman from delivering can increase her risk of mortality. If she ruptures her membranes, the risk of an infection is far higher. In addition, instrumentation of the uterus is associated with abnormal placental invasion in a subsequent pregnancy, which has an extremely high risk of hemorrhage and mortality. A third area to think about is that 2/3 of the women, the black women who have babies in our country, do so outside of wedlock. So they don't have the social support. They are more likely to live in poverty. And I think that that's an issue that we should be thinking about too.
Absolutely. You kind of hit on it, but what kind of information do we have about maternal mortality, and how do abortion numbers impact that information?
Well, maternal mortality in general, we have bad information, and we are starting to recognize that. In fact, for 10 years, the United States did not tell the world a maternal mortality rate because we knew that our death certificates had differing information on them. From state to state, we were picking up information differently. Studies show that at least 50% of maternal deaths do not get picked up on a death certificate. Regarding abortion, it's probably far less than that because most abortionists do not have hospital privileges. They do not take care of their complications. If a woman has a complication, she presents to an emergency room where another doctor will take care of her. The other doctor may not even know it was an abortion. She may keep that information from him. So death certificates are notoriously incomplete. Really good records linkage studies in European countries show that about 94% of abortion-related deaths are not documented on a death certificate. So undoubtedly, there's a lot going on that we don't recognize here.
That being said, Dr. Skop, in your opinion, what can the pro-life movement do to bring down the maternal mortality rate and to truly care for both the health of the mother and the child?
I think the pro-life movement can do a lot of the same things that it's already doing. Talk to our friends about why we're pro-life, help them to understand that we are pro-women. Continuing to support pregnancy care centers. I'm the chairman of the board of a pregnancy care center, Any Women Can. Everything we do is free. We provide support for pregnancy, but we also do free STI testing and treatment, and we do free mental health counseling. So many women choose an abortion because they have no support, because the man who impregnated them is gone, is not willing to support a baby. So we need to just come alongside women and continue to support them all the way through, not just when they make the decision not to have an abortion, but to continue to help them. Because women are in crisis, and abortion is not the crisis. Abortion is the symptom of the crisis that women in our country are experiencing.
Dr. Ingrid Skop, Associate Scholar at the Charlotte Lozier Institute, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
When we come back.
So if we don't have more of the other cultures coming together with us, it's not going to really change. We have to do it together as a team.
We'll introduce you to the mother-daughter team behind a Texas pregnancy care center. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm your host, Catherine Hadro. Planned Parenthood might have a new acting president, but the abortion giant is using these same old talking points and sending a mixed message. That is this week's Speak Out segment. Planned Parenthood recently named former board member Alexis McGill Johnson as acting president. This appointment quickly came after they fired their former president, Dr. Lena Wen, in a secret meeting. In an outgoing message to staff, Wen wrote, quote, "The new board leadership has determined that the priority of Planned Parenthood moving forward is to double down on abortion rights advocacy." Johnson, however, recently wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post, which contradicted that mission statement. She wrote, quote, "We are a healthcare provider, plain and simple." Johnson then argued that those who call Planned Parenthood's mission political offer, quote, "a false choice between advocating for women's health and offering health care." No wonder Planned Parenthood is having an identity crisis. It can't keep its story straight. As much as Johnson wants to paint the difference between a healthcare organization and a political advocacy group as a false choice, Planned Parenthood was clear about its choice to be an advocacy group when it ousted Wen, a medical doctor. Planned Parenthood routinely tries to present itself as a mainstream medical provider and downplays its political advocacy. And it is clear but this has not changed under its acting president. Bottom line is, we know that abortion continues to drive Planned Parenthood's bottom line. Remember, there is something you can do to counter today's culture of death by following this week's call to action. Ask President Trump and his administration to finalize a proposed regulation protecting conscience rights of healthcare entities that want nothing to do with brutal abortions. The pro-life movement often cites the powerful bond that exists between a mother and her child from the moment new life begins. For this week's Pro-Life Focus, we introduce you to a group that is living testimony to that bond and their efforts to build up a culture of life.
I am literally the visionary. I honestly, I do spend a lot of time before the Lord, like, what do you want me to do? Whatever you want me to do, God.
Wife and mother Janet Lamel is both the maternal founder of her family and of the Way, Truth, and Life Outreach, a grassroots effort offering support and hope to pregnant teenagers in East Texas. With a mission to care for both mother and child, it's only fitting then that Lamel's executive director is her own daughter, Latia Blunt.
Yes, because I'm mama. That
But I'm boss.
dynamic is like,
In the beginning, most of the time, they're like, I didn't even know that was your mom, or I didn't even know that was your daughter. And they're just like intrigued and love that. And it helps them to be like, wow, like what I'm carrying inside my baby, we can have a relationship like that. So it gives that hope.
Christian group The Way, Truth, and Life Outreach offers counseling and support to women in unplanned pregnancies and programs for new fathers. But the heart of this group, and the heart of Texas, is their Waller Pregnancy Care Center, which delivers holistic care from pregnancy tests to parenting classes. It's a big undertaking, but this duo is uniquely equipped for it, as Lamel's background is in nursing and Blunt's in administration.
I was like, well, let me just kind of help out. And it was just God ordained. It just kind of rolled in, and I started just doing the lay counseling with helping because I was an RA in college. So, I had that ability to work with the young people. And so it just turned into a mother-daughter thing.
This family's pro-life calling began right in their own home 15 years ago.
we started back in 2004 in my house, and our restroom and bedroom were counseling rooms, and then our living room became waiting rooms, and master bedroom became baby supply room, and me and my husband moved out of the house, needless to say, and so we were there for 3 years after our children all moved out, and eventually we moved into the community.
Working alongside pregnant mothers, these women witness the mother-daughter bond that begins in the womb.
They're encouraged and empowered by that, to see that although she's mom and I'm daughter, we're still partners in this thing called life, which it's all about. And so it brings a lot of hope to them.
My message would be, you can do anything that you're purposed to do. And your purpose is going to come to fruition. A baby is not going to stop what God has for you. But this gift that he sent you is life, and it's only going to be added to what your purpose is.
This pair feels especially called to share this truth with Black women, a demographic disproportionately affected by abortion, and in Texas, affected by one of the top highest maternal mortality rates in the nation.
I think from a nursing perspective, when you think about maternal morbidity, infant mortality, premature deliveries, Black women are leading in those statistics, unfortunately, and also in abortions. And somehow there's so many that do not know that it's a truth, and that it's important that we begin to educate our daughters and our children in the truth of the matter.
It's really important that our people who don't look like us, people of color, that you partner with someone that looks like us and go into the Black church and into the Black community, because they're not going to receive it from someone who's white. They'll be glad for you to come in, but they want one of us there also, and it makes a big difference. So if we don't have more of the other cultures coming together with us, it's not going to really change. We have to do it together as a team.
And this team knows that building up a culture of life starts in the family.
It's just all God's plan, and we never thought we would be doing something like this together.
That does it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Until next time, be sure to reach us at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com or connect with us on social media. Just search for EWTN Pro-Life on all the major platforms. And remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.